You're seeing before you a time-stamped article featuring one of our predictions: earthquake, solar flares, whale, dolphin strandings, coming this week, November 29th. Shout out to Jersey Dolphins. Thank you for your links and your heads up, and for you put us on another rabbit hole, but we're glad you did. Regarding dolphin strandings, how could we predict dolphin strandings? They do seem to happen in surges, and they happen all the time, kind of like earthquakes. But when you have strings of them together, and it's global, then you have to ask what is going on. The size and number of strandings is also of noteworthiness, and so is the location. But here we are in February 17th. Earthquake clusters, ocean mammal strandings going to happen any moment now. And again, featuring linking one of our videos. And so, yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for objectively describing what was going on. And I also wanted to just point out at the bottom of the article is a very familiar representation of the alignments we were talking about. Notice how the bottom yellow line doesn't quite go through the sun. This is because this is early, and February 18th was going to be that alignment. The line would be going directly through the sun at a 90 degree to a fictitious object. So how in the world can we make predictions about a fictitious object? Well, here's what happened in February. Here's an article you might be interested in. Pacific Marine Mammal Center, PMMC, is not taking the increase in dolphin strandings lightly and believes they are a cause for concern. Can you believe it? There it is right there. This is just the West Coast, by the way. The Pacific Marine Mammal Center talks about the sudden increase in February. Something we told you was going to happen. And somebody wrote an article about that. And lo and behold, the next day, it sucks being right. The strandings he's talked about date back to the 4th and continued on through the middle of February, when the alignment occurred, a 90 degree alignment between the sun and a fictitious object. And this fictitious object, this blows my mind. It just blows my mind completely. Every time we get into a major alignment with this fictitious object, animals start washing up on the beaches. But we also have earthquakes and sometimes solar flares. Also, if you're on the correct side of the sun, you start getting supermoons, which complicate everything. Massive surging tides. Yeah, that can strand a few things. So when the magnetism in the solar system's off, just by a little bit, these guys have compasses and electromagnetic sensors and sonic hearing. I mean, come on. And when we first saw a sudden increase in the Cape Cod dolphin strandings, and they had a symposium and they were addressing it, and then it was getting addressed at the federal level. But as I'm talking, I'm showing you articles that about big, huge strandings that were happening in February, the same February we were warning you about 2 weeks before the February got here, okay? And here they came. And it was all over the world. It wasn't just the West Coast. And it wasn't just dolphins. And it just wasn't porpoises. And it just wasn't short-fin pilot whales. It was long-fin pilot whales. And all over the globe during the month of February. especially the middle of the month of February. So, I mean, that should just blow your mind. And we have the actual written documents there about the predictions, both for December and for February. But the problem is we also made predictions for November, and those came true as well. But some of these were quite significant, and Mozambique, New Zealand, Indonesia, West Coast, and I'm just barely touching base. And here's that alignment, the fictitious object. We're going to go back and look at some of the major strandings. And what I did is I got a list from Jersey Dolphins of the strandings, and I went and got the exact date of those strandings, and then went to an orbital diagram. And what did I find? I found that fictitious object was always in an alignment with Jupiter, the Sun, and Earth, Jupiter and Earth, or Sun, Earth. Yes, that fictitious object. And we told you there was going to be more earthquakes. We had a surge in quakes, but we're seeing the magnitudes falling off in the numbers. That's a great thing. And that corresponds with the theory that this thing is leaving the solar system. We said that the sun was going to end with some solar flares, and the sun most definitely shot off a few flares, most of them filament releases and hider flares. But, we're trying to show you things that nobody has shown you before. And to understand why when the sun goes reactive, not just one sunspot, but everything goes reactive. And watch how the energy from the detonation at the top of the screen surges downward, surges forward, and how there's near simultaneous disturbances that wash across the sun from the upper right towards the lower left. You can see the very far lower left, you can see filaments spinning off the edge of that coronal hole. The edges of the coronal holes a lot of times have tornadic activity because of the speed of the particles that are flying out. The other thing too is those little tiny white spots, those little white dots. They're called. I think they're called anyways, they're not called active regions, and I want to say specules, but they're spherules. And notice how there's certain frames where there's none, and then all of a sudden you get a frame, and there's a dozen of them. So you can see them light up in sequence. And so we go back to the top of the screen, and we try to rock back and forth to show you that propagation of the waves and how there's energy spreading throughout the surface of the sun on the surface. And there's more than one. You got a sonic waves going on. You have hydrodynamic waves, which are like tsunamis. And then you have an electrical static kind of washing over, like when you take your hands and you run it over a wool sheet at night, you kind of get sparks across the face of the sheet. So you got all this stuff going on over the surface of the sun. So that's why when one sunspot goes off, they all seem to go off. And you notice we've said before that when we get in major alignments, we can get major openings in the plasma of the sun, and that creates coronal holes. And now what do we have? We haven't seen these in a month or two. All of a sudden we got these gaping coronal holes coming all the way up to the equator, and we got sunspots and filaments lifting. That happens during alignments. And earthquakes happen too. But if there's extra magnetism, then you're going to throw off your dolphins. Another thing we just wanted to point your attention to, I can't make 10 videos for 10 different things, so I cram a bunch of stuff onto a single video, as much information as I can. But there's the equatorial belt of water in the Atlantic. The arrow was just pointing at it. Nice filling back up with water after being sucked dry by those huge vortexes that now dominate global weather. And we officially no longer have a jet stream. But those reach down and grab that equatorial water and pull it in the wrong direction. For my entire life, the equatorial belts of water uh, reacted to the spin of the Earth. So the northern equatorial belt of water traversed from right to left. Always. Never do I ever remember it going the wrong direction. But it is now. So, and then we received huge criticism for saying that the vortex that went through Texas and was going to go out into the North Atlantic, camp underneath Greenland, get stronger, but pull water all the way up from Baja. Now, how can something up at Greenland do that? Well, there's the bottom part of the system, the spherical counterclockwise rotation. It's acting like a giant wheel, and that river of water acting like the pulley. And you can see water being drawn up from where? Well, that's through Florida and through the Gulf of Mexico. Well, that's not quite Baja yet. But wait a minute. And the lower left is Baja. There it is. Baja, lower left. Greenland, upper right. And us morons don't know what we're talking about. And not only is it drawing water up, it's incredibly fast. And right there at the bottom, what we see is a tornadic motion of a ghost system that does not show up on cloud level, low level radar. But that's helping, it's camped along that stream of water that's just shooting right up to Greenland. But this is down in Baja, Arizona, Southern California, Mexico. This system, invisible on other forms of radar. But we go really high altitude so we can get the particulates, and it shows itself. This is the entire Pacific, and there's that ghost system. There it is, and that's help driving that water. But that stream is coming all the way from Baja, the Gulf of California, coming all the way up and being transported up the East Coast to where? Greenland. And then just north, this is up near British Columbia, up the very top, and Northern California, towards the bottom. This is Canada, the Bay of Alaska, upper left. Look at this rotation. This is very fast for a counter rotation. Not counterclockwise, a counter rotation, meaning it's actually clockwise at a very rapid speed and a very well conformed. That's very unusual, and it's usually set up by very high wind speeds from these ghost systems. And you can see the trough of air. These things suck in at the 6 o'clock position, and they're like wheels on a conveyor belt, and the water is the belt. So there you have it. Us morons just showed you water racing, not just flowing, but racing from the Gulf of California up to Greenland. Now, at the very bottom right-hand corner of the screen, we're catching the edge of that system. The one that's coming from Baja and headed towards Greenland. You can see the trough of air, that buffer zone, set up by the rotation of that system. We went right to where the meat of that system was. We went on different radar, and there's no water in it, but we see these bizarre cloud geoengineering stripes that are actually traversing. Has nothing to do with the motion of the wind. The motion of the wind is a counterclockwise rotation. We're looking right in the center of it, and when we get there, we see at different wavelengths, we see something that's not water, not clouds, but adhering to a different motion that can't be attributed to pressure waves, can't be attributed to any of the rotation. That's something extra happening there. But then, right at the very top of your screen, upper left, there's that system again. The ghost system that had all the weirdness to it. But look at the water racing through Texas. Look at that. And a lot of this stream has been perpetuated for an entire winter, and the entire East Coast was subjected to this fast-moving rain, sleet, and snow, and they were getting mixes of it all over the place. Sometimes it would start out raining, and then it would turn to snow. Sometimes it would start out snowing, and then turn to rain. But that ghost system, the ghost system, is so prevalent throughout the global satellite map. So we're gonna show you more. Now, this is what's pulling the water up from Baja. This is Greenland at the very top, and there's 3 low pressure systems. We said that we're circling around each other. They themselves were kind of going ring around the rosies in a counterclockwise position and a counterclockwise rotation while spinning counterclockwise. And I said the effect of that was to really accelerate that stream of water. Now, the only thing that's not coming true is that we said it was going to pummel Europe. But then look what we have. We have more ghost systems. And the net effect of these systems, they're back to back to back. The net effect is that the backside is high pressure and is pushing all of those 3 rotating storms, pushing them away from the coast, keeping the coast dry for now. But this was just a few days ago. And we told you that when these systems get up and they start rotating one around the other, and they make kind of like a triangle sometimes, that really accelerates that water, and it will itself create a counter rotation, kind of like the analogy I use is kids flying off a merry-go-round, and so sooner or later you get that counter rotation going, and it looks like you have a storm spinning backwards. Some people say it's called an anti-cyclone. So then we go to the more recent picture of there's Greenland at the top, and look at 1, 2, and 3. Those are those systems making a triangle, rotating around each other. Look at the trough on the back side. But again, look at that counter rotation at the lower left of the screen. That's just forcing cold air and some water down into the mid-Atlantic, actually the North Atlantic. But those ghost systems are keeping the water at bay and keeping the water off of the European coast. So we just look down now to the mid-Atlantic. We go all the way down to cloud top because that takes all the particulates out. And you can see the equatorial belt of water traveling in the wrong direction. You can see the Gulf of Mexico almost has no clouds, and the Caribbean has no clouds, and the Central Atlantic has no clouds. But man, up here, these things are driving, pulling water as far as from far away as the Gulf of California and the South Pacific. Amazing how these systems have totally altered the jet stream, and we're actually have streams of water going from the equator to Greenland. And what the effect of this will have is the warm water coming from the south will shoot up north, and you can see the northern jet on that front system just shooting north and it's from being pitched. But the amazing thing that blows your mind is the dolphin strandings. It's amazing what's going on here. So Jersey Dolphins gave us some strandings. We went to the biggest strandings, pulled up the date, and looked at the orbital diagrams and found that every single one happened during an alignment with an object that supposedly doesn't exist. The last major alignment is happening now, and it's a 90-degree alignment with that object at the top. It's called Planet 9, Nemesis, Planet X. We've traced it and tracked it through the entire solar system. We never tied it to dolphin strandings directly on the alignment part. We just know it was throwing off the dolphins as early as 2012 when they were swimming. Instead of getting past a point, they were swimming inside the point and getting trapped inside of bays. And when they echolocate like crazy, this is what happens before they strand. They echolocate like crazy, but the slanted beach doesn't reflect that sonar back, so they're having trouble finding the open ocean and seeing the shallow water. But this is a 90-degree alignment between that object, Earth, and the Sun. Well, we also predicted on 12/1 there were going to be dolphin strandings. So we see what the alignment was on 12/1, and whoop, there's that fictitious object almost in the exact same place. And as Earth passed where that X is, between that and the Sun, major stranding. In fact, we had a major stranding in, I think it was New Zealand, that involved both whales and dolphins washing up together. Isn't that amazing? And I just went back and just correlated the date of the strandings. So each one of these dated images, you just go cross-reference it with strandings, and you'll see the strandings I'm talking about. But I went back and looked at the orbital diagrams for all the major strandings, and I'm just featuring some of them now. There are twice as many as I'm showing you. Now, way back in January 11th, 2018, major stranding happening. We had an alignment with Mars and Jupiter, but 90 degrees to the Earth and the Sun was Planet X. This was when it crossed Leo and reached its closest position, and it swung around and started headed back out towards Uranus. Now, January 19th, a year later, is where that X is. So it was almost a year later to get from its perihelion to the Sun to its perihelion with Earth. When it passed Earth, January 2019, we had to recalibrate all of our compasses and GPS. Largest shift of our magnetosphere, unprecedented. So then we go to March 2019, and we see an alignment between Earth, Jupiter, and that X. And we're going back on the dates of those strandings and pulling up the orbital diagrams, and we're seeing where we had Planet X, and there was always an alignment with our planet, and we're following an orbit that was drawn by Robert Harrington, Chief of Naval Astronomy. Somebody just flipped it, and we flipped it back and came up with this orbit coming in through Aquarius, now leaving out towards Taurus. So here's another alignment. The date just flashed by you. Amazing. Earth, Jupiter, and that Planet X. And notice as Jupiter gets closer to Saturn as the year goes on. May 2019, Mars swung in and created an alignment. Again, when these animals are so sensitive to gravitation, to sonar, to electromagnetism, and to magnetism. And if they're sensitive to magnetism, they can sense the gravity of the moon and everything else too. June 2020, this object then had exiting this solar system. This is 2 years since perihelion. It's already crossed back over Jupiter and Saturn's orbit and headed towards the orbital ring of Uranus. Venus swung through, completed an alignment, very quick and very sudden a very sharp earthquake activity as well. Boom, boom, boom. Then, because of the motion of the Earth and Venus, Venus swang out and then came back in and aligned with planet X again. This was just a month later, and there's the location we had it. And guess what? On that day, in that week, major strandings. I mean, major ones. So that blows my mind. We went and we found the date of a stranding, went to the orbital diagram, found an alignment with planet X. And it's right where we had predicted earthquakes were going to be happening. So is it the earthquakes that are causing the strandings or not? And we say no, because we've had earthquakes all along, and we have earthquakes with no strandings. But if earthquakes and the strandings were symptoms of the same geophysical forces, then that would make sense. There would be kind of a correlation. And if solar activity, which we just showed you, is part of those alignments, then you will see sometimes sunspot activity appeared to have correlated with dolphin strandings. Why? Because they're all symptoms of the alignments. We get earthquakes, solar flares, and strandings. Isn't that amazing? And it just blows my mind. I can't believe it. I just can't believe it. Anyways, until next time, hold on. So that leads us to the question of all those dates I just showed you. I'll leave you the link. See, the Extinction Protocol has the list. There's a couple. It's the same list. A couple other websites feature it, and it contains all the die-offs, but they're in chronological order. So you just scroll down and find the dates, and you'll see there's Dolphins strandings happening during those alignments. There's the alignments, and so seeing is believing. And since we're predicting them all, just as proof that we know what's going on, the predictions themselves are a tool to prove a theory. And to me, it's no longer a theory, it's a rule. And so the question begs to be asked then, how long will this continue? And we're looking at the geomagnetic effects softening in the next year or two, and that strandings should right about now start tapering off, which is great. We're seeing magnitudes tapering off on the earthquakes. We're seeing a lot of things tapering down, but the extreme ultraviolet, the gamma radiation, the ultraviolet itself, the visible light, some of the infrared is going to be highest that it's ever been in the last hundreds and hundreds of years, probably since medieval times. So, and that's because the cosmic rays are still present, and the sun's going to crank it up, and before it can blow all those particles out to the bow shock zone again and push it all out, we're going to have to deal with the interaction of the sun's rays with that second wind from that planet X, which is a brown dwarf. But I mean, I'm just so amazed. I just, every time I went and pulled up the orbital diagram, I used the date of the stranding, plugged it into the orbital diagram, and there they were, major alignments with this fictitious body. So the other factors that play a role in these strandings need to be addressed as well. Notice that we get on the same side of the sun as planet X. Notice the supermoon come back. It comes back. And when we have supermoons during some of these alignments, because the tug on it makes it just a little more elliptical. When it's more elliptical, it has times of the month where it passes very close to Earth. And when that happens, you have major tidal swings, spring tides springing forth, huge fluctuations, complete bays emptying, and that complicates the issue. But it's not the primary issue, because these animals know when you have a surge going in, sooner or later there's a surge that comes right back out again. So, and they're used to swimming in currents and hurricanes and things like that. So they understand current and patterns. What they don't get is when somebody messes with the compass. And in this case, it could be a brown dwarf that's exactly adhering to a model that was already mapped for it. Robert Harrington wrote an article, The Location of Planet X. He's a chief of naval astronomy. You can't get any higher than that in the astronomy world, anyways. And so and I'm trying to let people know that are on these ocean watches and mammal beachings, but it puts them in a precarious place because now they're using and predicting and calling alerts for alignments with a fictitious object that doesn't even exist. And you can bet that could get them in some deep water with somebody someday, somehow. So the surging tide. One last thing. When the food is depleting, also, you'll have animals that are very hungry and will take risks they normally don't take, and they will be chasing food more aggressively and more preoccupied fashion than they normally do. If they chase bait into an inlet, then that also is a factor in these strandings. So that's why you're seeing a surge in strandings. You're seeing a multiple stressors. And of course you have your weaponized sonar, but that doesn't affect the entire globe. That's a regional thing when that goes off. So I mean, everything we look at kind of adheres to an orbit that we've been mapping and talking about forever. Those earthquake predictions are based upon geophysical forces and geomagnetic forces. And if it affects the Earth tectonic plates, and if it makes the Earth wobble, and it makes our magnetosphere shift, and it makes the tides surge, what do you think it does to the dolphin? But here comes the supermoons. Here comes some alignments. We are seeing a softening of the quake magnitude, so we think if it's all symptomatic, then we think everything else is going to soften too. The thing that's not going to soften, though, is the radiation coming from the sky. 2 years, we're going to need to protect our forests, our coral, and ourselves. And then from 2023 on, it should be a little clearer sailing. But remember, fear mankind before you fear the solar system.